Right, I was born in England on the 15th of August in 1939, which was just 2 weeks before the start of World War II. And my father was very keen on the Air Force. He wanted to fly, but he was in a special employment. He was an electrician in a steelworks, and he couldn't get in. But finally he was accepted into the Air Force. And instead of training him in England, where the German Air Force knew where all the training bases were, and they used to spend their time shooting these young pilots out of the sky. So the Royal Air Force worked on a scheme to send young pilots under training to the Commonwealth.
Okay.
And they were sent to Canada, to Australia, to South Africa, and to Rhodesia. And there they were able to train in clear skies without any worry about German fighter aircraft coming to shoot them out of the sky. And when he was trained up, he went back to England and participated in the war. And at the end of the war, Winston Churchill told them to go out. Young British ex-combatants were encouraged by Winston Churchill to leave the British Isles and to go out and develop the empire. And this is what my dad did. He immigrated to South Africa. He got a job with the United Steel Company in Vereniging in South Africa to begin with. And then he and my mother went up to Rhodesia, where my father went and visited farmers that he had made friends with when he was training in the Air Force. And he was offered a job as a mechanic for a farm workshop in the Marandellas area, just south of Salisbury, what is now Harare. And he brought my mother up there and me and my two brothers. And I went to school at a junior school just out of Marandellas, halfway between Marandellas and Salisbury, a junior school called Digglefold. And I did my junior schooling there. And when I was there, I got to know a number of young Rhodesian boys whose fathers were farmers up there. And they took me out at weekends, took me out. This was a boarding school I went to. And I went out with my new Rhodesian friends, and their fathers took us out hunting at the weekends, and that's how I entered the hunting scene. And when I finished junior school, I then went down to Plumtree School, which is south 60 miles south of Bulawayo, which was the sort of the Eton College of Rhodesia. It was a very well-known school. And just before I went down there, when I turned 12, I was, after plaguing my father for ages, he finally bought me a .22 rifle, a single-shot .22 rifle, which was my pride and joy. And from then on, growing up in Rhodesia, in the schools of Rhodesia, I had a .22 rifle in one hand and a fishing rod in the other. And that's how I grew up. And I got to know other boys who were hunted with their fathers. And when I went to Plumtree, I actually took my .22 rifle with me. I wasn't allowed to do this. But after I'd been there for one term and I saw how the system worked, I took my .22 rifle with me back to Plumtree School and hid it away in the ceiling of my study, and from then on, I hunted every weekend. I was out either collecting birds' eggs or as a lot of little boys did, or I was out hunting. And in hunting, we included that shooting small antelope like duck and steenbok, and ducks, and guinea fowl, and we befriended the cook matron at the dining room at the boarding school, and she cooked all these things for us, and it ended up as we got older at school. So all the boys in the school decided they would like to come to our table, because our table always had extra food, and cooked in the school kitchen, and it was put on our plates, and we shared whatever food we got with the 9 other boys that we had on the table, 10 boys to a table, and that's how I grew up in Plumtree. Wasn't allowed at all, and obviously people who were watching us must have known that we had a rifle. I befriended a friend called Tim Hughes, who first of all brought a 410 shotgun to school. I had a 22, and he later changed his 410 to a 12 gauge shotgun. He brought his father's double barrel 12 gauge shotgun. And during the duck season, when the migrant ducks came in, we were shooting large quantities of ducks, and they were all cooked in the school kitchen. The matron, I'm sure, grew big and fat on all the extra things that she got from us. And we also went fishing at weekends, and we used to catch bream, tilapia species, not very big ones, but we caught them by the hundreds. We'd go out in exerts at weekends with 4 boys at a time, and when we were fishing, 4 of us had fishing rods there, and we brought back lots of fish, and we scaled them, and we gutted them, and we gave them clean to the lady in the kitchen, and that helped us all as well. And that's how come I started my hunting career in Rhodesia. Was at school with illegal firearms, but somehow we managed to sneak through all the time. My mother helped once in a while. I'm sure she was worried that we were doing this, but we were doing it anyway, and she couldn't really stop us. She, on one occasion, wrapped my 22 rifle up in cuttings, rose cuttings from her garden, which was wrapped in Hessian cloth and twine. When we were on to bigger things, when I got older at school, I changed my 22 rifle to a 22 Hornet, and we were shooting kudu and making lots of biltong, and that was our saving grace, I think, towards the end, because it's amazing what a little packet of top quality biltong will do in a prefect's pocket. He would turn his eye and look the other way as long as he got his biltong on a regular basis. At school I was a great athlete. I won all the Victor Ludorums, all the championships in athletics. I played first 11 hockey for the first team hockey, where we played league in Bulawayo, and I played wing for the first 15 rugby. So I was great into sports, and I was actually selected. I broke the Rhodesian 120 meter, or 120 yards, sorry, it was 120 meters, 120 yard Rhodesian record for hurdles, which lasted in the country, an all-comers record, that lasted for 23 years after I left school. The young white people, when they left school, they had an option. They had to do one of several things. One, they had to become a soldier in the army for a certain length of time and do military service, or they could join the British South Africa Police, which was the company police force, for 3 years, or they could join the Air Force. We had a fledgling Air Force at that stage. And that was in when I left school, which was I left in 56. So I decided I'd follow my father's footsteps, and I joined the Royal Rhodesian Air Force. And I was with them for about 15 months, and then I was always trying to do strange things with these aeroplanes. It was like a big toy, and very powerful machines, and I was doing aerobatics over central Rhodesia at the time, and I almost went nosedive into the ground. At the last minute, I pulled myself out, but I pulled 8 G-forces in the aerobatic maneuvers that I was attempting to do, and as a consequence of that, I was invited by the Air Force to come out of my flying commission and to take a navigator's commission. They were about to get Canberra bombers in those days. I think they got them from Australia, but I'm not quite sure. And they needed navigators. And I said, no, if I can't fly, there's no point in me staying in the Air Force. And by then I had done my required 6 months service. So I left them. I left the Air Force, and then I started my life as a young man in Rhodesia. And I first started farming. My father by then had owned his own farms, and he was a tobacco farmer, mixed tobacco, maize and cattle farmer up in the Karoi area up to the north of the country. And I didn't mix with a lot of my dad's wishes in what he felt I should be doing. And I said, no, I want to get into the bush. I love the bush. I love nature. And a friend of ours had discovered a copper mine which had been built by what the Rhodesians termed the ancients. And Rhodesia, what is now Zimbabwe, has got a long history of prehistoric mining, if you like. And so we went up there, and I was invited by Mike to go and do a number of things to supervise 20 black guys who were putting trenches across the ore body to see how big the ore body was, and to set up the mine for modern mining techniques. And while we were down there, I was invited to shoot animals to feed the 20 laborers that we've got there. That's how I actually started hunting. And the animals that I took off were bushbuck. It was up in the hills, and there were big ravines with thick bushes, and the ravines full of bushbuck. And I spent a lot of my time following bushbuck and picking them up, bringing them back to the camp, and we lived on that sort of thing. And when I was there, I hunted my first leopard on the Angwa copper mines. And anyway, in the meantime, I was going out hunting leopards and what have you, and I also got myself a nice waterbuck ram and various other things. But my mother ended up with leopard skins coming out her ears in the lounge on the farm. And but I, in the meantime, had got to know the director of national parks. His name was Les Stewart. And Les Stewart's 2 twin sons were in the same house as me at Plumtree School. So because I was such an athlete, and I was the guy that got Lloyd House, always got all that. Once a year they had the school sports thing, and all the parents from all over Rhodesia used to come there. and we were kicked out of our studies, and some of these guys who were fathers, kids were there, had been there as schoolboys themselves, and they kicked out the kids out of the bath, and they slept in the bath, and they did all sorts of things, because the parents, it was a weekend for the parents to come to the sporting, the athletics. And I got to know Les Stewart very well, and because I was the athlete getting all the points for Lloyd House, and his two sons were at Lloyd House, he knew who I was, and he knew what I did. He knew quite a bit about me. But my dad was down there, and he and Les Stewart had some long chats. And my man was saying to him, you know, you want to get my son Ron to come and join national parks, because he's the exact right guy that you need. So at the Plumtree School Sports, my old man was bending his ears. And when I came out from the Angua, from where I was doing all the beryllium work, he said to me when I was going into this job, he said, we just want proof. You must do building. You must learn how to do building. You must learn how to fix motor cars. You must learn how to hunt. You must do all sorts of things. But you must take photographs of the things you do so that we can see what you've done. So I said, okay. So in the few months that I was down on the Angua there, which was the tsetse fly area. At the tsetse fly areas, you could buy a license to shoot an elephant for £2 in those days, because they'd already had people in gangs of guys in there shooting elephants and buffaloes, and to get rid of the food for the tsetse fly, because tsetse fly was going into all the commercial farming areas, and it was a big thing. But I didn't bother with that. I just went and shot my elephants. But I filmed everything that I did. The leopards that I shot, I filmed. The waterbuck I shot, I filmed. The elephant I shot, I filmed. Everything that I did. Putting corduroy bridges across riverbeds, just cutting the logs and putting them down like this so that you could drive over them with your vehicle. That's the sort of thing, the practicalities of it. So I took photographs of this, and I've got a big album, and I got all these big photographs done and put in place. And there's all the evidence of my hunting when I was down there, with the dead leopards and the dead elephant and all these sorts of things. And when I knew that the job was coming to a close, I went and I saw Les Stewart in the head office, National Parks head office in Salisbury. And I said, you suggested that I should do this, and I needed this, that, and the other. I said, I've followed your advice to the letter. I've done it. He says, well, what have you done? I said, and he says, did you have a license? Did you? I said, no. You see, I said, no, you didn't tell me anything about licenses. And he says, well, I don't know what we're going to do about that. I said, well, look, here's the evidence. All the film, photographs and everything. I gave him enough evidence there in photographic evidence, proof, to put me in jail for 6 months. And he didn't know what to do with me. He obviously didn't want to throw me in jail or anything, but I put him in a difficult position. It was a very difficult position. I only realize now what kind of position it is, because I was giving him everything that he needed to prosecute me, but he never did. He never did. I must tell you that he never did. So what he did was he called in his two in command, a guy called Bob Smith. Bob Smith and I started off getting with all this stuff. We eventually got into a very good relationship. We liked each other, and he called Bob Smith in, and he said to me, "Would you mind just leaving the room?" And I let him go outside. He said, "Take a seat in the bench in the passage. I'll call you in just now. I want to speak to Mr. Smith." So he spoke to Bob Smith. And then a little while later he said, "Come in, Mr. Smith wants to see you." So I called in, and he said, where are all these pictures of these animals that you've been hunting? And I showed him. There they are, they're all here. So, and then he got on to me about the legalities of and what have you. So I said, "But you know, I've been hunting. I was the first person to get otters, clawless otters, in the museum, specimens in the museum. People knew they were in the country, but nobody had bothered to put a specimen in the museum. I got specimens into the museum. I shot little birds and skinned them and stuffed them nicely to go into the museum, into the collection. Species that were not known in the country. And Ray Smithers, who was the director of national parks there, he and I were great mates. He used to feed me the .22 dust shot to shoot all these little birds, and I would shoot them. And lark-like bunting, the greater sparrow, a lot of things like this were never known in Rhodesia until I produced but I skinned them and everything, and boraxed them and everything, sent them, and he and I, Ray Smithers and I, got on very well together, very, very well together. These are senior civil servants in the country now. But I hung on to those guys like shit to blanket. And Ray Smithers and I got on very well. He also encouraged me to collect birds' eggs scientifically, and how to blow them, and what to look for, and all the records that had to go with every clutch of eggs. He also taught me that you mustn't take one egg at a time. You must take all the eggs in the nest. Let the birds relay the whole clutch, because very often in one clutch the eggs are different shapes, different tones, and what have you. And anyway, I got on very well with Ray Smithers. So anyway, I had to tell Bob Smith why I did what I did, and I said I didn't know I had to have a permit or a license or anything. So he said, "But you know, here, this is proof that you have done a lot of things that are illegal. You could go to jail for this. Do you know this?" Anyway, we got going on this, and I said, "I've been doing this for the museums for Mr. Ray Smithers for a long time. Dr. Ray Smithers." He said, "Do you know Ray Smithers?" I said, "Yes, I know him very well." He said, "All right, well, just go and sit up here on your chair again." And the next thing he rings up Ray Smithers. And Ray told me this later. He said that actually Ray didn't tell me, but Ted Davison, who was the old man, he was like the guy who started Kruger. Ted Davison was the guy who started Wankie in 1928. And Ted Davison told me that Ray Smithers had told him about me shooting this elephant and what have you, because now I was posted to Wankie under Ted Davison, and he also wanted to know what I had done and how I got in and what my experience was. But he laughed about it. He thought it was a great joke. And what happened was that Bob Smith phones up Ray Smithers and he says, "We've got a guy here called Ron Thomson, and he seems very interested in birds, and he's shot a whole heap of leopards, and he's shot an elephant. He hasn't had a license or anything like this." And Ray Smithers, from the time I was at school, I was supplying Ray Smithers with very important specimens. And he said, "It's my experience of Ron Thomson. If he wants to come into national parks, grab him before he runs away somewhere else." So that's how I got into national parks. Les Stewart wouldn't make the decision. Bob Smith relied upon support from Ray Smithers, and as a consequence of that, Bob Smith on Ray Smith's recommendation, appointed me into the department. And I wanted to go to Wankie straight away. Big game and what have you, that's what I needed. And he said, no, well, you may have to start smaller than that. He said, we've got a new appointment now in the Metopus. We'd like you to go there. So I said, well, as long as I've got a job and I can get in there, I'd be happy to do that. So they sent me to the Metopus. And the guy in charge of the Metopus was an ex-policeman called John Hatton, who he and I didn't get on at all well, not in the slightest. And so he and I didn't see eye to eye. We got off on the wrong foot in the Metopus. But what happened then was that there was an elderly man called Yuri Shrobler, who was in his over 50 at that stage, and he was putting up fences in the Metopus. Do you know the Metopus National Park? Big granite hills. It's a beautiful place, and full of leopards and full of dussies. And all the wild, big game, all the game that had been there at one stage was shot out since the Pioneer Column got there and the Ndebele's got there. And the tourists were coming because of the beauty of the park, but we wanted to make it better than that. We wanted to have them to come and be able to look at wild animals in the park. So we arranged to build a big fenced paddock and then to go up to Wankie and to bring game from Wankie down and release them in this big paddock. And eventually we put in giraffe. When I say giraffe, I think there were 4 giraffe to begin with, and then there were 7 or 8 buffalo, and there were about 7 or 8 wildebeest, but they were all youngsters, not babies. They were weaned from milk. But a lot of the animals that we caught up there, we went up with lassos and we chased after them and stripped down Land Rovers. And as they were running along, we would put a noose around their back leg, lift it up like a fishing rod, tighten it, grab its tail, jump out, grab it, pull it down, tie it up, go and put it in a pen, go and catch another one, put them together. And we did that with giraffe, with buffalo, with eland, with wildebeest, zebra, a whole lot of different things like this. So that was very exciting for me. I went with the Metopus lorry up to Ngamo to go where the National Parks team were catching game for the Metopus. But I drove up there in the lorry, and the guys, the parks guys at Ngamo, they built a big cages on the back of the lorry, and then we shifted all the animals in. The wildebeest were one batch of wildebeest, one batch of buffalo, three giraffe, and then the next lorry had 3 giraffe, and so on. Then we took them back down to the Metopus through the bush, 200 miles, all the way down through the bush, through all these different areas, got to the Metopus, backed up against a ramp, opened the gates. The gates were all made of poles, tied together with wire. And then we opened them and they came out onto this bench thing. And then from there they moved off into the park. And I mean, the wildebeest were only this high. I've got photographs of me with I had a baby wildebeest about the same size. And we released them all into the park. And I then went back again for a second batch of these things, and we brought them back. So now we had about, I don't know how many animals after a while. We had quite a lot of animals in this park. But the leopards were looking at these things, and they were all youngsters. And they started nailing them, and we were getting them down and bringing their breakfast down for nothing. So it was decided that we had to get rid of the leopards in the game park. So I was tasked with the job then, because I'd shot a lot of leopards, and because Yuri Shrobler, the old guy who put up the fence, he'd also done a lot of leopard hunting. We then went out every night with spotlights looking for leopards where the other game was running around. I had shot 21 leopards altogether. I'd go out to shoot two in one night, sort of thing. But all these figures went back to head office, and this is what I was expected to do. And I got good reports from the game rangers at main camp who had done the capture game. They invited me to join them. I joined them in the stripped down Land Rovers catching these animals, and I mucked in with them. So I got a good reputation with those guys. But my leopard kill rate went right up. And then what happened was they suddenly, there was a big hana as to whether I should stay in the department or whether I should leave the department and get out of it, because I'd upset one of the good guys, or experienced guys, ex-policemen. And fortunately, I had Bob Smith looking after my interests in head office. And Les Stewart was also a mate of mine up there. He was the director. Anyway, the next thing I know is that I'm not going to get fired after all. Suddenly I was told I've got to pack up everything, take all my goods and chattels up to main camp. I'm on transfer to main camp in Wankie, and that's exactly what I wanted. Exactly what I wanted. And from then, when I got up there, the first thing I had to do was to assist Tim Braybrook putting platforms up in trees so that we could sit in the trees over a 24-hour period at the height of the full moon on October every year. They put platforms up over the trees and sat up there and counted the elephants and any animal bigger than a jackal that came down to drink at the pans was counted. And it was really an elephant count, but we counted everything else as well. Parks Board came down from Salisbury. These were senior executives, including Ray Smithers, including Chief Justice Sir Hugh Beadle, and a number of other people. Ted Davison, of course, was there in Wankie. All the rangers and everyone in Wankie were all around there too. And we counted 3,500 elephants in Wankie that year, and they'd only counted less than 2,500 the previous year. They said, well, where these elephants come from? They'd come across the border from Botswana, and they'd put extra water in Wankie, and that attracted all these things in. And Hugh Beadle said, we took him around and we showed him the elephants were knocking the shit out of the kiat trees, and they were all lying on their backs, and the elephants just pushing them down and eating them. And all the acacia trees, all the big umlala trees were being pulled down. So the chairman of the board was Sir Hugh Beadle, the Chief Justice. Absolutely great guy. And he says, what are we going to do about it? We've got the whole board here. We may as well have an impromptu board meeting. And we've come down here to count these things. We've got the elephant figures. We know what it's all about now. What are we going to do about it? We've seen the habitat. The habitat has been ruined. Totally ruined. So surely we as the board, we're all here together. We can all vouch for the fact that we've got a what's it, when they've got a quorum? We've got a quorum, and let's have a look and see what we can do. So he looks at this little lot and he says, one thing I want to start off straight away and tell you straight away, that we've all seen the damage to the habitat that's being done, and everyone said yes, yes, yes. Nobody's able to tell us what a carrying capacity is. Here we had the same problem in Wankie in 1960 as Kruger have got today. Nobody thought about the importance of carrying capacities. Now there, my first week in main camp in Wankie National Park, I came across the same problem with the guys there. Nobody had even thought about carrying capacity, as they haven't here. So now what happens is they got talking, and he says, we've been around, we've walked, we've driven all along the roads here. We've seen that there are as many trees lying on their backs in Wankie as there are standing up now. And if we wait any longer, there are going to be no more left standing up, which is what you've got in Kruger today. That was in 1960. And I knew nothing about it. My ears and my eyes were open just listening to all these arguments. And he says it would be stupid of us to go back to Salisbury knowing we've got this problem here and it's got to be resolved. We can't resolve it. Because if we let this carry on, we're going to have no Wankie left. It's going to be gone. So what happened then, he says, nobody can tell us about the carrying capacity. That's the figure we need. This is why I'm so adamant on it. That's the figure we need, because we must never allow the elephants to get more than the carrying capacity of the habitat. We've got to find out a way to work out the habitat. He said, we're told that last year when there were 2,500 elephants, the damage to the trees wasn't so bad. But 2,500 elephants in a game reserve that is 5,000 square miles in extent works out at 1 elephant per 2 square miles. That's right, isn't it? 2,500? 2,500 elephants in an area that is 5,000 square miles. It's 1 elephant per 2 square miles. And he says, my bet is that the carrying capacity for Wankie is nearer 2,500 than 3,500. And we've just counted 3,500 this week, we counted. So therefore there are infinitely, 3,500 is too many. We want to reduce it down to at least 2,500. And he says, as chairman of the board, that's my advice we must now decide on this. This is what we're going to do. So they hummed and hawed about the whole thing, and they said, yeah, but how are you going to reduce 3,500 to 2,500? That means you're going to have to shoot elephants in the park. And Sir Hugh Beadle said, if we've got to do that, so be it. We've got to do it. But we've got to reduce those elephants. We've got to bring their numbers down to a level that the habitat can support. So anyway, he hummed and hawed and they got going, and they kept on saying, but you know, Wankie is a sanctuary. It's a wildlife sanctuary. And the people, when they hear we're culling elephants in Wankie, they get very uptight with us. Very uptight. Ted Davison came up with the idea. He says, every year, the elephants from Wankie National Park leave the park and then walk right down through to the bottom end of Wankie, cross the Suhumi River, which is a fossil river, and go into the Chilocho teak forests. And they go down there for one reason and one reason only, and that is because that's when villagers in the area, when their mealies are starting to get ripe, that's when the elephants go down and they eat their hell out. But and we go down every year and we shoot the odd elephant here, there and everywhere. And we kill the elephants that are the crop raiders, which helps our reputation, national parks, with the local people. We've got good opportunities with the local people. They recognize us as helping them. But we could shoot a hell of a lot more elephant down there. We could shoot 1,000 elephants in the teak forest down there. So Hugh Beadle says, well, there you are. There's your solution. We wait until the elephants leave here. They go into the Chilocho teak forest. They go out of the park, and we shoot them down there. And if we can shoot 1,000 down there, then we will shoot 1,000 down there. Well, but the public mustn't get to hear about this. And old Sir Hugh says, no, you must tell the public about it. But the public weren't told about it. But we went down, Tim Raybrook and I went down, and we started shooting elephants in the Chilocho teak forests. And I wouldn't say, I don't think that we shot 1,000 elephants, but we shot several hundred elephants. My estimate for shooting, when I was transferred 4 years later, or 3.5 years later, I was transferred from main camp to Benga after Kariba had filled to capacity and all the Patonka people came out. I seem to remember recording that I shot 600 elephant on my own on crop protection in the Benga district. But that's where it started. It started in Wankie in 1960, and I had only been there for less than a week before I was caught up in this jungle of discussion. But I see what's happening here in Kruger today. It's an exact replica of what I had in 1960 at main camp in Wankie National Park. Exactly the same. It's the same parameters, the same issues, and funnily enough, the numbers of elephants for Kruger National Park, the carrying capacity in Kruger National Park was, I worked out in the 1950s with 3,500. But that, in actual fact, the carrying capacity should have dropped down to 2,500, which is exactly the same as at Wankie, exactly the same as in the Gonarajor. So when I'm talking about elephants and elephant numbers and carrying capacities and things, I've had that experience behind me all the way along the way for years and years and years, for 20 odd years.